afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Community Connections. I'm Vera Houle, Director of Community Relations at APTN. Before we start today, I just want to take a moment and do a land acknowledgement. While we are meeting in a virtual capacity today, we would like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous lands on which we are grateful to live, work, and play. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people that call this nation home. We must reaffirm our commitment to improving relationships between nations and to respecting local Indigenous people and cultures. Miigwech. And welcome. So joining us today on our Community Connections January webinar is our special guest, Isaac Murdoch. Hi, Isaac. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Excellent. A little bit about our guest. Isaac's Ojibwe, and he belongs to the Fish Clan and currently lives in Thunder Mountain, because if I try and say it, it doesn't come out right. So I don't want to mispronunciate your community. I'll leave that for you to do. But you live in an Indigenous community that focuses on language, Indigenous language, art, and land-based activities. And you've been blessed with the opportunity to grow up in the traditional setting of hunting and gathering on the land and spent many years learning from elders. You spend much of your time as a storyteller, and your art has been recognized worldwide. And recently, your song, Indian Song, has blown up on the Indigenous charts. So happy for you, and thank you for joining us today, Isaac. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing really great, thank you.
So tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Bonjour. Mazanapkan ge go na be Indishnikas. Gene be guk shabiga jwaten donjaba. Gnoje and do them. Nishna be nini and dao. Nipki ajbikong ninda. And getchin and dam ya mampi. We gnonin guk. So my name is the shapeshifter who paints the rocks.
Nice.
A real deadly Indian name. And my village, Genebeguk Jabigajwat, means the place where the serpents are painted on the rocks. And this is the logo of our community. And I'm Ojibwe, and I currently live at Nimki Ajbekong, which is Thunder Mountain. And I'm very happy to be here to be able to speak to you. Naha Miigwech, thank you.
Miigwech, thank you so much. A little bit about me. I'm from Territory 1 Sandy Bay First Nation here in Manitoba, right on Lake Manitoba. Born and raised here my entire life. I also speak Ojibwe, but our dialect's a little bit different. I guess that's the territory difference with the language and the dialect, but I do understand a little bit here and there, which is nice. And so this month, January, we're talking about the moons. And we've been blessed with 2 moons this month. What are some of the teachings and stories that are related to that? And before we go, I just want to let our guests know that are joining us, if you have any questions you'd like to post to myself or to Isaac, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A. Please post your questions there, either in between or at the end of the hour before we're done. Miigwech.
Miigwech, thank you. Yes, so
Isaac, so January.
Yeah, go ahead, Vera.
No, go ahead. I was just waiting. It's up yours. Go ahead.
Okay, it's my turn. Okay.
Yes, it is.
So I remember years ago, the old people would talk about the moon in a very sacred way. They would say that the moon is a very powerful spirit, and that it's a grandma, and that the moon itself fills up with water from the earth, and then it releases it back to the earth. And that they used to call the moon Gichimanidoo-giizis, which means water sun. And that every once in a while, the moon will deplete all of its water, and then a new moon will come. And they used to call it Gichimanidoo-giizis, which means the new moon is coming. and it meant like Ashke go Jen, which means it's like the new helper in the sky has arrived. And so we believe that this moon is a helper to us, and that it provides us with nourishment in life. We couldn't survive without the moon, of course. I mean, every human body on earth is connected to it because we're filled with water. So my body is like 75% water and 25% maple syrup, Vera.
Yeah.
And and of course I mean, everybody's connected, but it's the Quail, it's the women that are strongly connected to the moon. And when I was younger, they used to have these ceremonies, Ashke Goje Wen, they used to call it, where they would feast and give prayers to this new helper in the sky during new moon, so that as that cycle passes through, we would, of course, would be able to receive the strength and the courage to face whatever life has to give us. And so, all of the moons were represented by, different animals or spirits, so that it would help us gauge our lives in accordance to the natural laws that Chinak Ngewaninnon in, the sacred laws of the earth. And so the moon is really a map on how to live here correctly. And it's also a helper that helps us, be able to do that. And
So
so
for,
was
oh,
always
sorry.
fascinated by the moon. Yeah, go ahead.
It is very
Yeah.
fascinating. And for our young people, is it important for them to, when is the right time for them to learn about these teachings and these ceremonies? Is there a right of a certain time frame?
I mean, I think that you learn it right when you're babies. You're brought into these ceremonies, you're taught these things as children. Like I remember when I was young, there was a full moon out, and the moon was red. And I remember the elders covered up the windows, and they told me a story of a time when a young child was fascinated by this red moon, and he went walking out on the lake to take a better look at it, but his footprint stopped, and the moon took that child up there, and that's where that child is now. And you can actually see that child's face up there. And so we're told that the moon is very powerful, and that there's a place up there called Dashkopgok, which means that there's a crack in the rock there, and that there's a family that lives inside there. And so we're told that it's a very sacred place, and that the best, to me, the best way to teach the young people is right out of the sacred hoop. We start teaching our young people these things right away, so it becomes a part of their hard drive. It becomes a part of their thinking. It becomes a part of their worldview.
Okay. So with this month having two moons, and they're both full moons, are there particular ceremonies or teachings in between those two moons we should know or be aware of?
Well, what's really fascinating is that, mainstream society uses the Gregorian calendar, which has a fascinating history by its own. Of course, there is like Pope Gregory. I mean, this whole calendar system is actually was designed and named after a pope who wanted to have a more accurate system. But the system isn't as accurate as we would think. That's why they have leap year. That's why we have 12 to 13 moons that shift back and forth. And, during this time of year, we're very blessed to have an extra helper, during our year to bring good things to us. And so what that means is that we're receiving more medicine from the sky. We're receiving more from the sky world than normal, which is a good thing. We're very blessed and lucky to have that.
Bewitch. So with that calendar not being in sync, it doesn't sync with our teachings then, does it?
No, the Gregorian calendar is a foreign system that doesn't really sync up with ours. And so with ours, we have our own creation story, our own celestial stories about the stars and when things line up. and we have our own celebrations based on those times. And we have to remember that in different parts of the world, they see things differently up in the sky. The stars are different. They have different constellations. They have different stories. And so over here, we're very unique in having our own set of stories and Atsukanan, sacred teachings about the sky world. And so we're very lucky to have that as Indigenous people here.
And also, I feel that this time of year, this season plays a big part of that too. Because if I remember growing up, I was born and raised with my grandparents, and this time of year, it was more of the preparing for spring, preparing for summer, getting ready and learning and having storytelling and teachings. Is that still, well, you live in your community, does that still happen?
Yeah, so this is really storytelling time. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. One of the first reasons is, I think, is because, they call this Gichimanidoo-giizis, the great moon, some people call it Gichimanidoo-giizis, the great sun. There's all sorts of names for it. But either way, what's really powerful about this particular moon and this lunar cycle is that the spirits are the strongest because it's so dark outside. And this is their time to roam the earth. This is their time when they feast. This is their time when they love the darkness, and they love the way that it is right now. They love this moon. And so there's lots of spirit helpers all over the earth. And so we tell our stories, and as we tell our stories, we feast these spirits. And so this is a time for us to prepare spiritually. But for us, there's no difference between, preparing spiritually and physically. It's one and the same. It's connected. In order to have a good hunt, you have to make sure that your offerings that you give sema, and begidna sema, you have to, you make your offering of tobacco, you make your petitions to the spirits. But it's also a time to invite them into our homes through storytelling, through Atsukan, where we invite them into our homes and we share these things with our children, because there's so many of them around during this moon that it's the right thing to do. And of course, as we talk about them, and as we tell stories about them, and we teach about the great things and the medicines they give us, we also feast them. So this is their feasting time. This is when they love to eat, and so there's constantly people making offerings in the fire all the time, during storytelling time, because we've just invited them into our lives. And so, because the spirits are so great in numbers this time of year, it's very good to tell the stories and to try to seek that medicine to help us prepare for spring and summer and all of those things.
Okay, miigwech. I see there is a inquiry from Joan Morningstar asking if you'd be able to tell the full teaching of the moon.
Hi, Joan Morningstar. I know, Joan. Thank you for tuning in. I don't know the full teaching of the moon. I just heard little stories here and there, and I think that it would probably take a whole bunch of people over a series of stories to get a fuller picture of it.
Okay.
I'm good, but I ain't that good. Yeah, but thanks, Joan.
Well, in relation to this month, you've been a wealth of information with the two moons and the teaching there, and also the reflection, like I was saying with the speaking, this time of month. I remember my grandpa, we used to get visitors and they talk about things, or we'd go and sit at the elder center and they talk about things that are actually happening today with global warming, with the events around the world and the changes with Mother Nature. And I feel that has a lot to do with the moon and the sky systems in place. Am I? kind of
Yeah,
remembering some of those stories, right?
I mean, absolutely, Vera. I remember my grandparents, especially my grandpa, and sometimes my grandmother, they would say, let's go see a sacred site. I'd be okay, let's go. I'd be so excited. And we'd leave at like 8 o'clock at night when it was dark. I'd be like, where are we going in the dark? And we go to this one place by the lake. Of course, the lake would be frozen. And they'd say the sacred site that we want to show you is in the sky. And they'd say that that sacred site is hanging up there. And they talk about the moon. And they believe that it's a very sacred being, and that it's very powerful, and that it's a grandmother itself. And so in our creation story, the moon had a granddaughter that argued with her sister, and they got into a fight, and she fell off the moon, and she came down to the earth, and she married a bear, and they had a daughter, and they raised the daughter, and she had some kids, and one of those kids was Nanabuju. So there's a big story about the creation of the earth, and all of the helpers that come from the moon. And so there's beautiful stories about it. And how we relate that to climate change is that many times as Anishinaabe or as people, we somehow believe that we're not a very distinct indigenous species in our ecosystems. Things like the Indian Act and colonization, programs and services economies have really taken us away from the land. And we're not a free people on the land like how we used to be, immersed in our teachings and immersed in a very sustainable economy that was passed down for generations and generations. The Indian Act changed all that. And so, it's different now. It's very different. But at the same time, there's a resurgence of trying to reclaim who we are as Indigenous people. And part of that is understanding our role with the earth, and accepting and understanding that we are an Indigenous species in our ecosystems, and that when we return back to that, there's a positive domino effect that's caused by that diversity. And that and when we use the moon and the grandmothers to help us do that, then we receive great medicine to be able to achieve that sort of a task, which would be so hard to do right now because of how we think and because of how we live. And so the moon is a great asset. I don't want to call it an asset. That sounds silly. The moon is a great spirit that can help us and help fix things. So it's very important, I think, that we recognize the great helpers in the sky during this time.
Rich, thank you. I see Joan has responded and asking, if there's time for the moon teaching that is scheduled. And I guess that what we were talking about and looking forward to talking about was the 2 moons that happened this month and the significance. True?
Yeah, so having that extra helper in the sky, it's almost like if we were to look at it in a certain way, like say we were hunting, and we all went hunting, and like normally we have 12 bow and arrows, but for whatever reason this year we got 13. That's that extra bow and arrow, could make the world of a difference during a hunt. It could be the bow and arrow that gets the moose or the bear or whatever we're going to eat. Or it's like having an extra fish net, or it's like having an extra pipe. It's having an extra healer in our village. It's like having an extra grandmother. It's like having a special guest there to help us during this year. And that's really, really special. That means we've been extra gifted with something. And so we need to, I think, respect that extra gift, give thanks for it, and call upon it to help us, which is really important.
Yes, that's true. So, and to clarify, there was 2 moons this month. So I think one was on January 17th, which was the wolf moon, I believe. And then there's a full moon tonight, I believe.
Nice.
Yes. Are you aware of the teaching of the wolf moon?
Well, I mean, I've always heard stories about the moons where I come from, so it's obviously region related. So every region will have their own interpretation of what that means to them based on their landscape,
Mhm.
based on the animals that live there, based on uh, just the geographical place where they're at. So, for example, the Anishinaabeg in Kansas are going to have a different set of names for their moons because they live in a different area. They have different animals. They have different trees. There's the moons are not like ours. Like they plant a lot earlier, things like that. So regionally, there's different, especially with the Anishinaabeg, there's different names for the moons,
Mhm.
and it's supposed to be that way. So it's very diverse in that way. But one thing I know about the wolf is that it's a very, very honorable animal, and it's a very spiritual animal, and that the wolf has great vision and great smell, and that they're very coordinated in what they do, and they work as a team, and so that tells us that we should be like that too.
Mhm.
We should have insight, we should have vision, we should use our ears, we should work with our people and focus. That's important because of course of the challenges that we face as Indigenous people. That would be really, really important to succeed.
Exactly. Very true. Very true. Thank you. Um, so territorially, I guess that also means like for the Anishinaabe and the different areas, the teachings would be different, but similar, not true?
Yeah, I mean, throughout all of Anishinaabeg territory, the teachings, the creation stories, they're all very, very much the similar. Um, for example, when I was in northern Saskatchewan, there was a pictograph of a man, a wolf, and a moose. And I found out the story of that pictograph, which was the painting on the rocks. They call it Musinabigan.
Mhm.
It was a very ancient painting made out of that red clay paint. And they told me the story of it. And then, of course, in Wisconsin, when I was researching pictographs there was a picture of a man, a moose, and a wolf. And again, it was the same story. And then I went to another place in Ontario where there was a picture of a man, a moose, and a wolf, and it was exactly the same story. So you had the same story, thousands of miles away, being made at thousands of years apart from each other, but yet they were very, very accurate with each other, which
Mhm.
shows me that oral history is extremely accurate. It's more accurate than we think, because books get lost in through translation, through interpretation, through for all sorts of reasons. But our oral history, it's just so precise. And so that's what's the beauty about it, is that throughout most of our Anishinaabeg Nation, the teachings will be very much the same. So we will have the same teachings as other people do, even though maybe we'll call this moon something different
Mhm.
because we have different seasons. But our teachings in general are all very much the same, and they all complement each other. As a nation, we're very strong, and we're also very, very in sync with each other. Um, it would be amazing to see if we had a big gathering of Anishinaabe people, from all over the states and all over North America, if we would gather together and talk about climate change and things like that. I think it would be just incredible.
Oh, it would be. It'd be nice to gather again in person as it is. This last 2 years has been pretty tough in terms of, adjusting to the changes with the pandemic and everything. Um, and I think it's also given opportunity for people to kind of learn, take learning to a different level about identity, teaching, storytelling. Because it's an opportunity. It can be seen as an opportunity, I believe. I see we have a question from Jacqueline about the 2 moons. She's still learning and notices in the calendars that she buys at the store, they have the full moons noted, and asks, are these the same moons as ours, or are they calendars, the Gregorian calendar that you were talking about?
So basically, how it works is in our celestial movements, we have 12 and 13 moons, and they rotate at different years. And it's just a way for us to keep a more precise, accurate, definition of what's happening celestially. And so, the different societies, like the Wabanowin Society, which is a society that is really focused on celestial teachings, the movements of the stars and the sun, the stories of all the pictures up there. They're the record holders of all this, a lot of knowledge that comes from there. And so these moons are part of that. And these moons are also like templates or little like codes on how to live here, but they also show us what's happening as time goes on. And so these moons are very instrumental in letting us know it's time to do this, it's time to do that. This moon is coming up, we have to prepare to do this. And so, for example, sucker moon, that's one of my favorite moons, because that's when we go snare sucker fish. That's when we eat all the eggs in the balloons and boil all the fish heads, and we just go, we have a lot of fun. I don't think kids do that anymore. I think kids should do that, because that was a really fun time. And that moon, there's lots of teachings about the moon and the suckerfish.
Oh,
and so
could you share with us, maybe? Could you share a story with us, a teaching of the sucker moon and the fish?
Sure. So the suckerfish is, for those that don't know, I'm going to actually show you a picture of a suckerfish.
Oh, okay.
For those of you that don't know, and I have it on my phone because I'm just that type of person. So I don't know if you can see this.
Oh, okay. Yes, right there. Perfect. Yes, can see that.
Okay, so that's a suckerfish.
Okay.
And they say that a long time ago, the suckers, of course, there were always plenty. And there was this chief that was a sucker. And that chief was very grumpy for some reason and just had a bad morning, and they were spawning in the river. And, all of a sudden this great big proud moose comes along, very proud, and says to the chief, hello, my relatives. I just want to know if I can cross this creek, but there's so many of you. I was just wondering if you can kind of move out of the way as I just pass through. I don't want to step on anybody. And that chief was so grumpy, said, no, don't even think about it. You got to walk all the way around where the rocks are, where we're not there. You're not going to cross here. And that moose said, it's only going to take a second, and I'll offer you something. I'll give you something. That fish said, there's nothing you can give me. I don't want you crossing the river right now. And I don't like you at all. So that moose got real mad. Sometimes they have a short temper. And it huffed and puffed. And that fish said, you can't do nothing to me. And all of a sudden that moose kicked that sucker right in the forehead. And that's why when you look at a suckerfish, when you look at their forehead, they got a dent in there. kind of like those ones. So when you look at a suckerfish, you're going to see those dents there like this. But more importantly, when you eat that sucker head and you take it out and you're eating the lips and the tongue and the eyes and the brain and all the meat and all the slimy things, when you're eating it, you're going to get down to a certain spot in the face, and you take that bone out, and it's a perfect set of moose horns. It looks,
Really?
yes, it looks exactly like moose horns. And that's why that fish got that bone in there. It's to remind that fish what happened a long time ago when it wouldn't let the moose cross. And so when we eat the fish, we also eat that medicine too, and are reminded that we have to be kind and patient with people. And that's the story that I know about that.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
for
Um,
sure.
got a request here about a winter story.
Well, they say that winter is a very sacred time of year because there's a spirit called Babonene. And Babonene is the winter man. And he lives way up in Gwaednong, up in the stars, and has a lodge up there. And Babon Nene has the responsibility of freezing us, you know, and for a reason, because a long time ago the people got greedy and they tried to destroy everything. They tried to destroy the earth. And so the old man froze the earth and continues to freeze the earth today so that, now we can't be greedy. We have to work together to prepare for winter. We have to share our food with everybody. Everybody shares everything with everybody. That's how we survive. That's how nature survives. Everything gives everything to everything. And so this winter reminds us that we have to work together, work hard to prepare for each other so that we can survive together as a nation. And that it does play a big role. It also helps get rid of sickness. It helps, purify the earth. It helps, that there's that power of white, that white blanket. For many in Anishinaabe, the color white is not a color, it's a power. The power of snow, there's a spirit in there. So all of that has come to help us as Anishinaabe people. And then, like everything else, it comes with laws. So when we understand those laws and those teachings about the snow and the wind, then we become stronger and better people because of it.
Miigwech, that's beautiful. Um, I see we have a comment that I just wanted to share with everybody. It's from Max Cynthia. She doesn't have a question, but she wanted to comment about the cycle of the moon. And she's tuning in from the other side of the world in Jerusalem. Welcome, Max Cynthia, thank you for joining us. And she said that they follow a lunar calendar, meaning there are 13 moons, one per month. And according to the Gregorian calendar, there are only 12 months. So one month every year usually has 2 months called a blue moon. And right now it is a new moon, and the next full moon is in February on the 16th. And she'd like to thank you, Isaac, for all the knowledge, encouragement, love, and blessings that you share. She's constantly uplifted from you and your wonderful spirit. So miigwech.
Oh, thank you so much.
That's very nice. So I guess it's very similar. Blue moon. I've heard the blue moon before in February. Do you know of this moon? Or is that?
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah.
But just the new moon. So during the new moon, that's because this new cycle is starting to happen. As the moon fills up with water, then it becomes more powerful. And during the full moon, that's when the cycle is at its most powerfulest. And then, of course, it starts releasing water back down to the earth. But during the new moon, that's when we sing our songs. That's when we offer prayers and ask for guidance and strength. But it's also a time that we burn, if we have any hair that, from our brushes, or we have fingernail clippings, or maybe old things that we have to burn, that's when we burn it so that we can start brand new again. Just like how it says, Ashke go Jewin, it's the new helper in the sky that's coming. So at that time during new moon, we have those ceremonies, and there's even medicine that we drink, to help us through this next cycle. And, just recently, a lot of the Koyak are doing the full moon ceremonies. And so of course there's a whole teaching about the moon that I just have absolutely no idea about, because it involves women and of course their monthly moon times and things like that. So
Mhm.
really you're only getting just a little nothing from me today. If you really wanted to find out like really deadly serious hardcore teachings about the moon, then a grandmother would be able to just like go through this stuff with you and tell you lots of things. But because I don't have my moon time,
Mhm.
and because I don't have those gifts, there's nothing I can say about it. It's not my place to say anything about it.
No, I totally understand and respect that, miigwech, miigwech. So, and I noticed that, like on your website, how is there? What can I say? What would you recommend for those inquiring minds that really want to try and learn about teachings, about stories, about what's the best, like this is one opportunity we try and connect with various storytellers and teachers and just to have a little bit more of an insight. What are some recommendations from you that people can take and move forward to learn?
Well, I think that websites are good. They're good sources of information, especially during COVID and things like that. um so like check out my website. Of course there's things on stories, and there's resources for teachers, there's songs and videos, and all sorts of neat stuff on there. But really, going local and staying local to your own elders in your region, and trying to capture that and revitalize that information before it disappears would be more valuable than looking at my website.
But it
So
is
if
a
you,
beginning. It is an opportunity to learn as well.
yes, it is. So I mean, if you can like I go to old folks homes, like really I do.
Mhm.
I'll find a way in, and I'll be like, okay, and like, here's some tobacco, here's a gift. Can you tell me about this, or I'll ask them about that.
Mhm.
Right now it's so critical that we try to get the information from these old people. And so seeing people in human life, in real life, even if it's talking to them on the phone,
Mhm.
trying to revitalize information, because we're still missing so many different parts.
Mhm.
So the more and more that we can speak to real people and try to get that information, the better. Next best thing, go to website.
Next best
but
thing. Yes.
but at the same time, we have to be careful what we're learning on the internet.
Mhm.
So there's lots of stuff that's on the internet that is not compatible with what we're with our beliefs and values. So just be careful about that. I'm always cautious about the internet.
Mhm. Thank you. That is a very good point to remember. I guess one of the things too is if you have those elders in your realm of family, take the opportunity and ask the simple question: was what was it like when you grew up? I remember having that, my grandparents and even some of the elders now, and I'm getting there, but I still ask them, what was it like when you grew up? And that can generate an amazing amount of conversation.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
we have a comment and a request. What is your interpretation of teachings in the story of the boy in the moon?
Well, there's a lot of teachings about that,
Mhm.
because like I was saying in the beginning of this very incredible chat, is that there's a place on the moon called Doshkopgok. And I know this because my great great grandfather went to the moon, during a vision quest. And he talked about Doshkopgok. He talked about a nest that was up there. He talked about how Sky Woman dug around the earth, uh, looking for her medicines because she fell off the moon. He talked about all these things that were passed down in the family. And one of the fascinating things is some of the things that are in the moon itself. And so there's this place called Doshkopgok, and the rocks open up magically because there's a a family that lives in there. And this is where a lot of our teachings come from. So for example, the 7 grandfather teachings come from there. There's elders that live inside that cave in there. And in front of them, they had, all these clay pots. And each clay pot represented, a ceremony and a teaching. And that, they say that there has been humans that have been brought up there to go live with them, and they like it up there. And so, the moon is not just it's not just one person. There's families that live up there, inside there. They're very spiritual. And of course, Western science hasn't caught up to indigenous knowledge yet, so they can't prove it. I always say that it's always cool when indigenous knowledge validates, Western science. It happens all the time. They don't validate what we say. Sometimes they'll say, oh my goodness, we found this thing about the celestial thing, and the indigenous people have been saying that for years, and yada, yada, yada. And they were right. It's actually the other way around. We've been saying this for a long time, and you finally caught up. And so, traditional knowledge about the moon is very sacred, and that a little boy was brought up there. And that boy was brought up there for 2 reasons. Number one is the moonlight itself struck that boy in his forehead when he was sleeping. He was sleeping there, and the grandmother thought she should cover that little spot in the birch bark up, because that moon was red, which was not a good thing. And that light came through and hit that boy in the head, and that light really liked that boy. And so that boy woke up and went walking on the ice, and the light itself took that boy up into Doshkopkok, into that crack, and into that world that's inside the moon. And that boy didn't want to come down. Through ceremony, they asked that boy, do you want to come back? And he said, no, I like it here. There's other kids to play with, and I like it here, but everything's okay. And every once in a while, I'll show my face. And when you see my face, know that I'm okay, and that it's always important to look after the children. So when I was a kid, it was not a good thing, as children, to be in the moonlight, because they say it could take you away. But when we got older to be hunters, then it was a good thing, because you could see at nighttime. And that's when we'd always be hunting in our canoes, getting our moose and getting our whatever we're going to eat, bear. That was a good thing.
Oh, miigwech. Thank you. That was, it actually made me think about how my grandmother used to always be very cautious when the little ones, for the first year, they made sure the windows were covered at night. So as soon as it set and the moon was out, it was that first year was so crucial that curtains were always closed. You always kept that light out until they made that first year, and then she wasn't so upset about it. And I totally forgot about that. Thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So that was the little boy on the moon. What other interesting stories would you say are another creation story? What part of the creation story? What would be one that would be timely?
Well, they say a long time ago, the men were not doing well because they weren't purifying themselves, and they weren't shedding any negative things out of their body. And so the men started to get sick, and they weren't following the instructions, And so, of course, men weren't following the instructions. There's never been a man on earth that has followed the instructions from the very start, So of course that happened. And so they started to get sick. And so a young child was put out to fast.
Mhm.
And during this fast, just like my great-great-grandfather, an eagle came and grabbed that boy and took him all the way to the moon and took that boy into the crescent moon. So you see how there's a crescent moon there.
Mhm.
And inside the crescent part, there was a door there. And that door led that boy into that we call it Hua Jing, into that cave. And that boy was in that cave, and that's when an elder, revealed a bundle, and of course taught the boy about the sacred Madotsewen, the sweat lodge.
Mhm.
And of course that boy was brought back down, and of course taught that ceremony to the people. What's fascinating is the boy was only gone for 6 days, but when he came back to teach that, he was an old man. And
Oh.
so he aged while he was up there. When he came back, he taught the people of the sweat lodge. And that's why in the sweat lodge you'll have, like, where they put the grandfathers and the grandmothers, the stones,
Mhm.
they'll put them in a crescent moon often. And then the fire is the doorway that goes into that place. And so that's why the fire is in the crescent moon. And then of course you have the lodge itself, which represents the earth. And then you have the fire pit, which represents the womb. And so we're reenacting what happened through ceremony and the teachings of why that is here, so that we're able to purify ourselves and to find the strength and courage to do what we have to do. And so the sweat lodge became a very big medicinal tool and used for many things, cures and all of those things. So that came from the moon. But there is many other things that came from there, but of course we don't have enough time.
Yes, it could be a very long day. And thank you so much for sharing that teaching, that reminder. I greatly appreciate it. Um, there's a question that's asked, does the shadow cast by the moon represent anything?
It tells us, like, it tells us where the cycle is. So it tells us how much water is here and how much water is up there. It tells us, um, when the cycle is almost over, when it's just beginning. And there's different names for, like, APTN,
Hmm.
the half moon. There's different names for it. And so, it just tells us where we are in the cycle of things, especially in the winter time, because we really want spring to be here. So it's just like we're constantly monitoring the moon all the time just to make sure that, spring really is coming. For those of you that live in the bush, you know what I mean.
Yeah, yes. Even living here, this is a record amount of snow for Winnipeg. Like, I'm based in Winnipeg, and in 30 years, this is the most snow we've gotten. It's been 30 years since we've had this much snow, and there's a lot.
I mean, I remember going through Winnipeg one time and I thought my whole face was going to fall off. Like, it's just the coldest. It's not, I mean, it just doesn't feel like the coldest place on the planet. It actually says that it is. When
Yeah.
you Google coldest place on the planet, Winnipeg always comes up somewhere.
Yes.
Um, so Winnipeg people, you have my deepest respect.
Thank you. Some of us just tend to hibernate and stay inside and do a lot of reading and researching because it's cold. It gets cold,
Right,
but it's
right.
also very refreshing. Yesterday, my husband and I went for a walk, even though it was minus, what was it, 15, we bundled up and snow pants and everything. And it was a beautiful walk. It was very refreshing and it looked and felt new. I was thinking about the weather and how it felt out there. And it felt clean. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I mean, that's what the cold weather does, is it cleans everything. And
Mhm.
of course, when the snow melts, this renewal, the water breaks and babies are born and birds are casting their voice all over the place, just like, it's just a beautiful thing. So winter, you know, provides us was such a beautiful, beautiful medicine. You know, and the moons that accompany winter are very powerful. You know, they're very strong. Yeah.
I look forward to spring though, and I look forward to being able to be out in the nice warm sun again. This has been an incredible 40 minutes, 45 minutes that we've spent chatting. And I just want to take a little bit of time and learn more about you. You've got an amazing background. Like you have tell us about the song that you, what is it called? Indian song?
Yeah,
Like that?
Indian. So,
Yeah.
um, I mean, I do have kind of an interesting, somewhat of an interesting background, but I don't think it's any different than anybody else's. You know, I remember being apprehended by Indian agents at the age of 5, which was very common, you know, in my generation. I do come from a family that suffers the effects of intergenerational trauma. When I was younger, I was lucky not to go to school. So I went to go live in the bush with elders. My mother really thought that it would be better for me than to get like an academic schooling, but to go in the bush. And she was right. It was better for me. And you know, I started a band, and we were in a band. We used to travel around, and it was fun. We used to pack up the band halls and stuff like that. Um, but alcohol, of course, was a big part of it. And I didn't drink, so I was like a really odd person in the band. But you know, I started to do music, but it wasn't until later on in life, like in my mid 40s, where I thought, you know, like you should dabble with music because you've always thought about it, and maybe now's the time. And I thought, well, you're too old, and you know, it's just you just don't do that, you know.
Never too
And
old.
so then you know, lots of people said you're not too old. Like do what you do, you know. So I started to write music, and I collaborated with this amazing musician named Matt Epp, and we wrote some songs, and we did some songs. And one of the songs that I wrote was called Indian Song, and it's really about part of my journey of, you know, going through the impacts of intergenerational trauma, of, you know, of the horrible experience that we had when we were abducted by Indian agents, and my brother was run over. Big story. We'll get into it at another APTN session.
Okay.
I did suffer some pretty incredible mental health issues as a young person
Mhm.
because of all this jazz. And so the song is really about, you know, being on the street, suffering mental health, suffering addictions, perhaps, and then but finding a way out of it. You know, through our culture and our heritage, our language, and you know, just to bring light of that, because a lot of our people, um, you know, have done amazing things through our culture and have, you know, been extremely resilient and have gone from, you know, feeling very, very not good to feeling just absolutely fantastic because of the cultural practices and healings that we have as a people. And so, you know, that's what the song is really about. It's called Indian Song, and there was a video that was made. Um, you remember that show Red Green?
Yes, actually,
Okay,
yes, I
so
do.
it's that guy Red Green's son Max is the one who shot the video, and
Okay.
he donated his time and his effort to make the video because he just liked the song.
Oh,
Um,
yes, I did.
yeah,
Well, I
so he
did
Googled it.
check it out. So I really encourage everybody go to YouTube and Indian song, and it is an amazing. I listened and I watched, and you could really feel that there was that personal aspect. But coming from, like you said, when what I also went through at the age of 5, the Indian agent picking me up and taking me to school from my grandparents, and if it hadn't been for culture, tradition. My grandparents were traditional, the lodge and the teachings and the support from the community that I was in. I don't think I'd be where I am today. I don't, like our culture is beautiful. So those that have the opportunity to reach out to an elder just to make a simple inquiry, I really encourage, take that time. It helps. It does help in the long run. I also want to mention your website. It's isaacmurdoch.com. And you have a lot of beautiful, interesting articles and research. If anybody wants to learn more, there's a good starting point. And we have one question I want to bring up. I don't know if you see, a drum carrier, Paula, wanted to share. She was taught to take our drums in the full moonlight to feast them. Question posted, is the moonlight only not safe for little ones, but medicine for other things?
I'm going to say so because when we got older, we were not scared of the moonlight like when we were little.
Mhm.
So I think that when we're smaller, we're closer to spirit and we're closer to those things and we're more vulnerable to wander off into the spiritual part of things. So I think that as you get older, it's okay. But I think it, like you're right, it's for just the little ones. Yeah, that's a good question. That's very good because it's good to know, when to do it and when not to do it. So that's pretty good.
Yes, thank you, Paula, for sharing that, because and it's different for everybody, for different cultures, like Anishinaabe from the north to the south, east to west, as you had said, it's similar, but there's differences too, and respectfully to each individual.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. I would say the best thing that you can do is just speak to the grandmas in your own region and just get the teachings from there. And and that would be really good. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, again, I really want to say thank you so much for your time, your amazing knowledge, and for sharing. I want to thank everybody that joined in and for this hour. It's time for us to wrap up. I think we're pretty much done on the questions. So grateful. We have a lot of people that are very grateful for your teachings, your time, your words, your songs, your sharing, your artwork, your advocacy. Miigwech, Isaac, so from many, many people that have joined us. And just a reminder, the recording, we are recording this webinar, so it will be posted. So everybody can tune in, watch it if you want to re-watch and hear some of the stories. And again, you can find Isaac's webpage at isaacmurdoch.com and YouTube. Definitely check out the music. It is very inspirational. Miigwech, I wish you well, take care, and be safe. I look forward to chatting again in the future. And all our viewers, you have a great day and stay safe. Miigwech.
Miigwech, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.